Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Research Showcase. My name is Kinneret Gordon. I am the lead research community officer on the WMF research team. I would like to welcome you to this month's Research Showcase. Research Showcases are monthly convenings organized by our team to share and recognize recent research on or relevant to the Wikimedia projects. For those of you joining us live, as always, we welcome you to ask questions of the speakers in the YouTube chat. We will monitor the channel and pass the questions to the speakers at the end of the presentation. We also, as always, kindly ask that attendees follow the friendly space policy and the universal code of conduct. Before we get started, I have a few announcements. The first one is that we have officially opened the nomination process for the Wikimedia Foundation Research Award of the Year. We invite all of you to nominate one or more scholarly research publications to be considered for the award. More information can be found at the link, which I'll share at the end of the announcements. Additionally, this is a very final reminder about the call for papers for Wiki Workshop. You're invited to contribute by submitting 2-page extended abstracts to this year's workshop. Submissions can include ongoing, completed, or already published work, as the proceedings are non-archival. The deadline for submission is March 9th at the end of the day. I will now add at the end of this announcement, I will add the link for the call in the chat. We're looking forward to your contributions and participation in this year's workshop. In addition, the call for papers for the second annual Wiki NLP workshop taking place during the ASL 2025 conference is also out. You can learn more about this workshop and submission guidelines on MetaWiki. Again, I'll share the link in a minute. And there are many more events and exciting research happening in our community. If you're not yet subscribed to the Wikimedia research mailing list, I highly recommend doing that now. It's a great way to connect with members of the community and stay updated on everything that's happening. I'll now pass it over to my colleague Diego, who will host today's showcase and introduce the theme and speakers of the month.
Thanks, Kinneret. Hello, everybody. I'm Diego Saez-Trumper. I'm research scientist at the Wikimedia Foundation, and I'm going to introduce you the January 2025 Research Showcase. Today, we are going to focus on Wikipedia administrators. Wikipedia admins are experienced volunteers entrusted with additional tools and responsibilities beyond regular editing. They play a crucial role in maintaining Wikipedia's quality and integrity by setting disputes, preventing vandalism, and enforcing community guidelines. Each month, admins collectively perform tens of thousands of administrative actions. We will learn more about these exact numbers later, which are vital to smooth functioning of every language version of Wikipedia. Today, our colleagues are going to present findings from recent research that investigate patterns of administrators' retention and attrition and explore reasons for administrators to come, stay, and leave their role. Our speakers today are all members of the Wikimedia research team, and more precisely, we will hear from Eli Asikin-Garmager as the principal design researcher in the team, Yu-Ming Liou, lead strategist also in the research team, Claudia Liou, who is senior design researcher, and Caroline Myrick, senior analyst. After the talk, we will have 15 minutes for questions, so feel free to put your questions in the YouTube chat, and our colleague Caroline will monitor the chat and pass the questions to the speakers. So thank you very much, and with this, I pass into our speakers.
Thanks, Diego. Hi, my name's Eli, and I'm a member of the Wikimedia Foundation's research team, as Diego's mentioned. Today, I have the pleasure of introducing and helping share a recent project in which we examine the current state of administrators on different language versions of Wikipedia, and what motivates editors to become administrators, as well as reasons they may depart from the role. As you may know, and as Diego's just mentioned, administrators are users with extra rights who do work beyond editing. Today, I'll be co-presenting with my colleagues Yu-Ming, Claudia, and Caroline. Next slide, please. And next slide. First, though, why study admins at all? Well, to begin with, they're core to keeping Wikipedia content trustworthy. And these users with extended rights enable a multi-generational Wikipedia. Next, declining admin numbers can impact other extended rights roles, such as check users and stewards. And as you see from this slide, there have been repeated concerns expressed on the signpost throughout the years about declining admin numbers. In addition, I might add to these reasons the fact that, for one, until now, we've also lacked cross-wiki comparative work about admins. Not only that, but we've also lacked, to some degree, basic metrics about admins for many wikis. And we don't know if declining admin numbers is an isolated or widespread problem. Next slide, please. So how did we study this topic? To begin with, our investigation was primarily focused on a short list of 21 different larger language versions of Wikipedia, or wikis, except where otherwise noted. And to arrive at this short list, we used 1,000 weekly non-bot edits and more than 20 monthly active admins as a cutoff point. Our approach included, in brief, quantitative analyses, interviews, and surveys of more than 2,000 current and potential admins. We estimate that through our survey of current admins, we reached, on average, 67% of current admins on the surveyed projects. Let's briefly consider the basic admin lifecycle in order to highlight some definitions we used. Most importantly, what do admins do? Well, they take administrative actions, which involve changes to user blocks, page protection levels, page deletion status, or the rights of other users. And sort of obviously, these actions are taken, of course, by administrators, or henceforth admins today, individuals with extra rights who do work beyond editing. Critical to a healthy Wikipedia in the future are potential admins, or editors who meet the criteria for adminship as set by their Wikipedia edition, but who are not currently admins. I should just make a brief note that the criteria for adminship does vary across language editions. On this slide, you can also see two processes represented that are critical to understanding adminship as well. So first, towards the left, you can see the request for adminship, or also known as RFA process. This is the name for the general process by which an editor can gain entry into the admin user group. A user may be submitted as a candidate by themselves or through nomination by others. Like the RFA process, the process for removal of admin rights varies by wiki, and generally this occurs when current admins cannot or no longer wish to fulfill admin duties. Next slide, please. Basic definitions aside, today we intend to answer the following questions for you. These are: who are admins and how do they work? Are we losing admins? Where are the new admins? And what recommendations come from these findings? And with that, I'll pass it to Caroline, who will begin to answer this first question.
Thank you, Eli. Yeah, so let's start with answering our first question. Who are admins? The vast majority of admins are sysops, or systems operators. On some Wikipedias, though, administrative responsibilities that are normally associated with just sysops are extended to other user groups. So, for example, Portuguese Wikipedia allows members of the rollbacker group to block users. The policy there is that rollbackers can block users engaging in vandalism. The degree of dispersal of admin rights varies across Wikipedias. So, for example, some Wikipedias, 100% of admins are sysops. But on Russian, Japanese, and Persian Wikipedias, for example, 1/3 of users performing administrative actions are actually not in the sysop group. So hopefully that gives you a clearer picture of who we're talking about when we talk about admins. Let's find out some more about them. Admins are mostly men. Admins in our survey sample ranged from 63% men to 92% men, depending on the project. This gender imbalance wasn't surprising, as the Community Insights survey, for example, found that about 7% of admins identify as women. So this was in line with Community Insights. And our comparison of current admins with potential admins' gender showed really similar percentages. So this suggests that we don't necessarily have a pipeline problem so much as a pool problem. And what I mean by that is we don't have so much of an effect of the RFA process, for example, as maybe some sort of issue with editors qualifying for potential adminship. Additionally, admins are highly educated. Prior survey research has consistently shown that Wikipedians, and by that I mean readers and contributors like editors, are highly educated in comparison to global populations as well as the general population of internet users. Across each of our surveyed projects, we did find that current and potential Wikipedia admins are likely to be very similarly highly educated. Next slide, please. Admins live across the world. We found that admins report living in over 200 countries, which is amazing. Geographic disparities between current and potential administrators are limited, but there were two prominent exceptions that we found based on the survey data. We found first that English Wikipedia admins are disproportionately likely to be located in the United States or Canada compared to potential English Wikipedia admins. In other words, those folks are overrepresented. On Spanish Wikipedia, administrators in North and Central America, excluding Mexico, are underrepresented relative to the potential Spanish Wikipedia administrator population pool. So in other words, those areas are underrepresented. And lastly, on English Wikipedia, many highly tenured admins became admins at a young age, 29 years of age or younger. But we are seeing that newer admins are actually less likely to become an admin at a young age and instead tend to skew a bit older. So in other words, we see lower recruitment of younger editors over time. And when we look at the distribution of potential admins, 18% of potential admin respondents on Wikipedia, English Wikipedia that is, say that they are young, 18 to 29. That was 18% compared to just 7% of current admins. So this suggests that there may be some specific challenges to recruiting younger administrators that are distinct from those in attracting younger readers and editors. This is particularly notable because previous research indicates that Wikipedia readers and editors either match or skew younger than the age distribution of the global population. So now that you understand a bit more about who admins are, I will now hand it over to Claudia to explain how admin workloads are distributed.
Thanks, Caroline. So yeah, I'm going to be talking a little bit about how admins currently organize and distribute the amount of work that they do. As a quick reminder, admin work colloquially can mean a really broad array of different activities, but for the purposes of this study, we're only looking at 4 specific types of actions that show up in the log. And these are user blocks, page protection, page deletion, and user rights changes. Slide, please. So our key points here are, number 1, the majority of admin work is performed by humans. And number 2, the majority of admin work is done by a small group of highly active admins. So let's dig a little bit deeper into both of these statements. Next slide, please. Based on our survey results and also on data that we queried, the top 15% most active admins performed anywhere from 50 to 80% of total admin actions month over month from October 2023 to November 2024. So that is to say the 15% most active admins are doing a disproportionate amount of the admin work on their wikis. To emphasize this further, our surveys suggest that a small proportion of admins spend much more time doing admin work than others. 14% of our English Wiki current admins survey respondents said that they spend 8 or more hours a week on admin work. That's more than a full working day. Meanwhile, 58% of our respondents on English Wikipedia said they spend 0 to 2 hours per week on admin work. So again, this suggests there's a small proportion of admins who are very highly active, performing a lot of actions, potentially spending a lot of time on admin work. Next slide, please. Survey responses and quantitative data also suggest there is a group of what we are calling administratively inactive admins. That is, admins who don't perform one of those 4 admin activities that we're looking at. On English Wikipedia, our queried data suggests that 60% of English Wikipedia admins didn't take one of those 4 admin actions in the month of November 2024. Our survey results suggest a lower proportion, 38%, self-report as being inactive in the last 30 days. Now, this difference could be down to the fact that there's a lot of different definitions for inactivity, and our definition for administratively inactive is a lot stricter than many of the other definitions for inactivity. This was also the highest proportion out of all of the wikis we looked at for the survey. So this suggests that English Wikipedia has the highest proportion of these administratively inactive admins, and that admins on the other wikis that we studied were generally more active overall. Slide, please. Let's now move on to looking at admin bot activity versus human admin activity. So the figure on the right shows the number of monthly admin actions performed by humans, bots, and abuse filter. So humans in purple, bots in teal, or kind of the blue-green color, and abuse filter in yellow. As you can see, with the exception of the 2 outliers, Spanish and Russian Wikipedia, the majority of admin actions are being done by humans. Meanwhile, the bot-performed activity seems to be largely one-off or not at like a high or significant steady rate. So we argue that we should understand these as an event-based phenomenon. By this, I mean we should understand bot-based admin actions as events that happen once for specific purposes and then drop off quite rapidly. In the case of Russian Wikipedia, we know that there is a long-standing policy of preemptively blocking proxy IPs using automated tools, which explains the very high number of bot-performed admin actions. And on Spanish Wikipedia, over the time that we queried data, we also understand that there was a similar script run to mass block proxy IP edits, hence the very, very large spike in bot activity. Over the rest of our queried data, human activity on Spanish Wikipedia, human admin activity was higher than bot admin activity. A more comprehensive, fuller figure is available in our full report if you're interested. So this leads us back to our key point. Most admin work is done by humans. Most of that work is done by a small group of highly active people. So what does that mean if we go back to our key question? Next slide, please. Are we losing admins? We can finally start to answer this. Slide, please. So the answer for most large Wikipedias is yes. Here we show the monthly active unique admins from January 2018 to November 2024. 4 wikis have upward trending numbers of monthly active admins. 4 are stable, but 13 out of 21, that's a little over half, show a decreasing trend line. We also looked at monthly active unique admins for over 200 smaller wikis and found that all but 1 are stable or rising. So this phenomenon of losing admins over time does seem to be one that is more present on larger wikis. Which obviously leads us to why. Are we losing admins because people are leaving? Next slide, please. So the answer we have found is that wikis are losing admins because the rate of admins joining is declining. The rate of admins leaving has remained relatively static over the last decade or so. Next slide, please. Speaking of admin attrition, we found through our survey that current administrators are highly motivated. They show high levels of short-term retention, high levels of satisfaction, positive feelings towards their work are also quite high. Overall burnout levels appear low across all 6 surveyed Wikipedias as well. In fact, 80% of our English Wikipedia admins reported that they expect to serve as an admin 2 years from now. On other wikis, a majority of current admins report the same thing, although there's a bit more variance, which suggests that there's less certainty about that short-term retention. However, we should note that lower retention and higher burnout is positively correlated with experiencing significant harassment as an admin or experiencing conflict with other admins. So in other words, those who have been harassed for being an admin or who have come into conflict with other admins are more likely to consider quitting, more likely to feel burnt out as a result of their admin activities. We are also aware that self-reporting of motivation can be misleadingly high for surveys, but overall, we did find a very high degree of satisfaction and short-term retention based on our survey data. So given these pretty high levels of motivation, what could drive an admin to leave? Next slide, please. Why do admins leave? Throughout our interviews with former admins, 3 key themes surfaced. Importantly, none of these were ever cited as the sole factor that pushed somebody to leave. All of our interviewees expressed their decision to leave as a result of a mixture of all of these factors. So firstly, inactivity. Lowered admin activity, hand in hand with general lower activity on Wiki, provides a reason to step down from adminship. Major life changes, such as graduation, getting a new job, getting into a serious relationship, also all affects the availability of free time, which affects the amount of time that can be spent as an admin on Wikipedia. Secondly, conflict. Disagreements with other administrators was cited as a major reason to leave, even if that conflict wasn't necessarily severe, so long as it was sort of frequent or recurrent. Disagreements with other editors was not explicitly called out as a reason to leave. However, remember, we did see a positive correlation between experiencing harassment or frequent conflict and a higher likelihood of quitting or thinking about quitting. Lastly, loss of motivation. Several participants spoke of feeling pressured to actively and frequently perform administrator work, which was generally understood was something that was separate from regular editing activity or article contributions. They felt like they had to do one or the other, but never had time to do both. This pressure seemed to be self-generated since our interview participants didn't tell us about any mechanisms that would allow them to audit fellow administrators or be audited by other administrators, but it was still a pressure that was very keenly felt and came up consistently over all of our interviews. Now, most of these things are outside of a community's ability to influence. However, regarding motivation and burnout, we know that there are multiple ways that admins can get support from their peers, whether that's informal social arrangements, up to something like the more formal programs like Polish Wikipedia's Admin Support Camp, where they instituted a program explicitly tackling burnout, trying to increase the admin community health, as well as holding workshops on topics like dealing with disinformation and how to carry out nonviolent communication. Slide, please. All right, given everything we've just discussed, let's look at the rate of admins leaving and joining. Since about 2010, the rate of admins joining has been steadily decreasing. Since about 2015, the rate of admins leaving has been steady or declining. This fits in with our earlier findings about admins being a highly motivated group, leaving for reasons that are generally insulated from sudden shocks. The spikes you see in outflow here are largely attributable to things like new inactivity thresholds for admin status. So really what we see from the numbers is that the key issue here seems to be that the rate of admins joining, inflow, isn't keeping up with a steady pace of admins leaving. These trends, of course, extend back even further than this for certain wikis, and I know it's not news to a lot of these communities, but in order to dig a little deeper into this topic, I'm going to hand it over to my colleague Yu-Ming.
Thanks so much, Claudia. So we'll start to tackle the obvious next question, which is where are the new admins? So to preview our results a little bit, there's sort of two stylized facts we can take away. First, overall interest in becoming an admin among the potential admin pool is relatively low, although there's some variation from project to project. Second, among those who are interested in becoming an admin, the RFA process constitutes a substantial barrier. So does anyone want to be an admin? Anecdotally, we know that admin status is considered a desirable and prestigious accomplishment among many Wikipedians. However, given that admins are a highly self-selecting group that's at the very bottom of a long and narrow Wikimedia engagement funnel, it's hard for us to say how much demand there is for adminship, or at least it has been hard before this research. By surveying a group of potential admins, those who formally qualify for an RFA under existing community rules, we can start to answer this question. It turns out that even among this group, interest is generally fairly low, although that does vary from project to project. Given that the RFA process is universally regarded in interviews as very challenging, something we'll return to later, we focus here on survey respondents who indicated the highest degree of interest in becoming an admin, saying that they're very interested in the survey item. When we compare across the surveyed projects, we see that interest is lowest among potential Polish Wikipedia admins, with only 5% saying they're very interested. Similarly low on English Wikipedia, where we see 8% very interested, although relatively higher on French Wikipedia, 12% very interested, and especially Spanish Wikipedia, 16% very interested. Keep in mind, though, that despite this variation, potential admins on every surveyed project were far and away most likely to say that they were not at all or only slightly interested in pursuing adminship. So what explains this low level of interest that we observe? Among potential admins who said they were not at all or only slightly interested, we followed up in the survey to ask why they had little to no interest in pursuing adminship. Consistent with what we heard in the interviews with current and former admins, admin work is seen as taking away time from editing by potential admins. For example, over 75% of English Wikipedia potential admins who saw this question cited it as a reason for their low interest in adminship. So it's useful to recall in this context that on most projects, but especially on English Wikipedia, the main formal qualification for an RFA is being an unusually prolific editor. This means that in effect, we're actively selecting for folks, both in the survey, but more importantly, among the pool of qualified admin candidates, people who really particularly value their work as editors. So in a similar vein, we also see that potential admins were very likely to say that admin work was just too time-consuming for them to take on. And this was true across all the surveyed projects, although we also saw that potential admins very frequently cited potential conflicts with editors as a reason for their lack of interest in adminship. And this was especially true on French Wikipedia. So what about the relatively small minority of qualified potential admins who are actually interested in becoming admins? In order to become admins, remember that they have to go through the request for adminship or RFA process. This is a process that was overwhelmingly described by interviewees as stressful, confusing, and just unpleasant. In short, it's a pretty substantial barrier for admin recruitment. And this has really not gone unnoticed by communities. In fact, as some of you likely know, the timing of this survey happened to coincide with the introduction of RFA process reforms on English Wikipedia. While this means that we were not able to evaluate any potential effects of the reform, and also that survey responses reflected feelings about the previous system, this context should serve to underscore a major takeaway. The English Wikipedia admin community largely regards the RFA process as it existed as in need of major reform. So this is reflected in our survey results. For example, surveyed English Wikipedia admins, by definition, successful RFA candidates, thought by more than a 50-point margin, 57 to 6, that it's too difficult versus too easy to become an admin. At the same time, many more of these current English Wikipedia admins thought that new RFA candidates were more qualified today than they were in the past, and this by a margin of 48 to 10%. In conclusion, we can say that most current admins think that new RFA candidates are more qualified now and yet are still unlikely to become admins because the process is just too hard. Now to dig in a little bit more about why the RFA process might constitute a substantial barrier to admin recruitment. So at least on English Wikipedia, and at least prior to the recently introduced reforms, we can say that the RFA process was widely regarded as lacking in both transparency and fairness. When we asked current English Wikipedia admins for their views on the RFA process, more of them thought that it was 1, unfair to candidates rather than fair, 37% to 26%, and 2, that it was difficult to understand rather than straightforward and transparent, 37% to 31%. And again, this is folks who by definition were successful in the process. Similarly, we saw relatively low awareness about the RFA process among potential English Wikipedia admins. About 40% of them total say they're either not at all or only slightly familiar with it. And consistent with this perceived lack of transparency, when current English Wikipedia admins look back on their own RFA experiences, they were most likely to cite meeting the unofficial, that is, implicit and unstated, RFA requirements as the biggest obstacle they had to overcome, with over half saying it was very or somewhat difficult to meet them. By comparison, meeting the official requirements and securing a nomination were regarded by these folks as considerably less challenging, with 70% and 61% respectively saying they were not very difficult. Now to take a look at some recommendations, I will pass it back to my colleague, Eli.
Yeah, thank you, Yu-Ming. So based on the results of this project, we've begun to identify recommendations for the Wikimedia Foundation, community adopted policies, and future researchers. I should note that due to the fact that administrator-related policies are both generated and updated through community processes, we consider the foundation to largely have a supportive role to play. But before we get to recommendations, I think it's important to briefly mention what we learned from current admins we surveyed regarding their wants. When surveyed, current English Wikipedia admins say they see the following 4 things as top priorities. These are recruitment, conflict support, conflict policy, and automation. These priorities were ranked similarly on the other 5 surveyed wikis. So the first opportunity I'd like to highlight is for the foundation to provide communities with better access to data and insights that can be used to assess the impact of administrator policies, but also policy change on both recruitment and activity levels. One gap uncovered in our study is the lack of effective evaluative mechanisms, and in some cases, even key basic metrics. The second opportunity is for the foundation to provide financial and planning support for admin-focused cross-wiki exchanges. Third, the foundation might also consider improving the automation of repetitive tasks performed by admins to both help distribute and reduce the workload. Moreover, there's an opportunity to explore ways of integrating admin tasks with current editing workflows. This may, in essence, make admin tasks feel more like editing and increase the accessibility and appeal to a larger pool of editors. So recall a few minutes ago, we learned that among potential admins, the hesitation to move into adminship oftentimes relates to a desire to want to focus on their current editing and the perception that adminship work is too time consuming. So we think this relates in part to that point. As for recommendations for community adopted policy, the first opportunity I'd like to highlight is to consider the adoption of programming and policy that's been used elsewhere to support current administrators and increase the flow of new admins. So there are various examples of support programs for admins, so including on Polish, German, and French Wikipedias, for which I've left some links here on the slides, and we heard a little bit earlier about one of these in the presentation. So as an example, in 2021, Wikimedia France decided to continue what was a 2020 experiment by offering broader and more comprehensive psychological support and assistance. Next, in addition to current efforts aimed at supporting new admins, there's an opportunity to establish better means of support for admin candidates to help reduce, as we've learned, the stresses of the RFA process and improve the number of successful candidates. I should note that the goal of this contact point person would not be to try and directly influence the result of the RFA. Instead, it would be to ensure the candidate has basic support through the process. Finally, this next recommendation stems in part from direct suggestions we received in interviews. Communities may consider further distributing or unbundling admin tasks. This may help disperse the admin workload while providing more opportunities for potential admins to learn and succeed with admin work. So to unpack this a little bit more, for example, such efforts could help increase the visibility of simple admin tasks, as well as facilitate easier access to these tasks. So this then could provide a clear on-ramp to admin work without requiring individuals to start with a full RFA process. Next slide. This project has addressed various foundational questions, but nonetheless, there remain a number of open questions. I'll just briefly mention one example here now, but we'd be happy to discuss these more during the Q&A today if folks are interested. One example to briefly highlight is the need for evaluative research into the effectiveness of admin support programs and more thorough investigation of the support that admins would find most effective and desirable. With that, we invite you to learn more about this topic. So join us for an office hours to follow up on data points and discuss and critique the recommendations we've shared. Share your ideas if you have recommendations that you see as stemming from the results that we've shared with you today. Next, you can read the full report or summary. There's a nice summary on the meta page for this. And then finally, we'd also invite you to learn more about the important ongoing RFA reform on English Wikipedia. And with that, we conclude our presentation today. Thanks for your attention. This work was not possible without collaboration with multiple individuals and support from other teams who you see listed here. Also, a special thanks to all our research participants and the editors and admins who contributed comments to our project meta page. And of course, thank you to all the Wikipedia admins for their continued day-to-day efforts to make Wikipedia what it is today. And with that, we'll now pause for questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eli. Super interesting presentation. And thank you for all the details. I know that there has been some conversations in YouTube, but I don't know if they're clear questions. So Caroline, are you monitoring the YouTube? No. Daisy. Daisy, any of the questions there or the discussions that are there that we want to bring here?
Yes, let me just scroll up real quick. There was a question from AS who asked, are you evaluating admin work as only information that arrives in the logs, or was this only survey-based? I know when I do admin work on Commons that it doesn't necessarily lead to an action.
Do you want to answer that one, Claudia, since I think you did a good job answering it in the chat, but to let folks watching know as well?
Sure. So the question of how to define admin work took us a little while. As you know, as I'm sure as a lot of the viewers are aware, admin work does tend to refer to quite a lot of different activities, which not all of them will show up in the log actions table. But for the purposes of our study, we focused on 4 very specific actions. So blocking, deleting, changing user rights, and page protections. This was chosen in order to have parity with previous definitions of administrator for other data sets like the Wiki comparison database that provides sort of year-over-year comparison snapshots of all of our different projects, which let us have a kind of firm historical and cross-wiki comparative basis. We know that the definition is very restrictive. We know that the definition is actually more restrictive than how a lot of wikis define admin status, but it basically gave us a basis to start cross-comparing definitions of adminship and admin activity and admin work. So it's sort of a necessary compromise in order to do the sort of cross-wiki work that we wanted to.
Thank you very much, Claudia.
We have a
Daisy?
question from Deborah, who is a first-time watcher of the research showcase. The question is, what findings from this research were most new or most surprising to you?
Maybe I can take a first pass. I think probably the answer to that will depend a little bit on the different individuals who are working on the project. First of all, thanks for tuning in and watching the research showcase today. Appreciate you joining and engaging with us. I think what I would choose to highlight here, and this is in part to again emphasize one of the maybe major or primary findings, is that as you recall from a little bit earlier on in the presentation, the issue of declining adminship appears to largely be what we might call a large Wikipedia problem. And so there were some important counterpoints as we saw to that generalization. But I think one of the big surprises for me was when we had the moment and opportunity And again, Caroline did a bunch of extra work to make this happen. But when we zoomed out to all the other wikis and wanted to know, okay, so are these trends and patterns unique or widespread? We found that, elsewhere, we don't see those same types of declines. So I think that's what I would highlight, but I'll leave it to the others to chime in.
Do you have more comments, Claudia? Go ahead.
I have one. For me, it's actually the finding that burnout is comparatively low. Satisfaction is very high, highest, in fact, on English Wikipedia. This was surprising to me because, sort of, as we discussed in when we were talking about where this research topic came from, a lot of it stemmed from us seeing a lot of articles being quite alarmed about the declining admin numbers on English Wikipedia. Now, obviously, that's not unique to English Wikipedia, but that coupled with such high retention and satisfaction numbers was, I mean, surprising in a positive sense to me.
I was going to respond similarly to what Eli said based on what he mentioned about, so Diego and I were able to look through all Wikipedias that had admin activity by 2018 so that we could compare all of them, and was surprised to see that a lot of the smaller wikis, the smaller Wikipedias, did have very stable admin numbers or increasing. However, there are many Wikipedias that the larger ones that we see decline. So I think I was surprised because going into it, we knew that there was decline happening, but we didn't know what the variation looked like across all Wikipedias. So just repeating what Eli just said, but I think that was quite surprising. A lot of the interview trends were not necessarily surprising because there are things we've heard from administrators already, but just stories that they provided about whether it's harassment experienced or the amount of work that they dedicate. These were not necessarily surprising, but just sort of like it was a great opportunity to really get a lot of data to support a lot of the things that admins have been telling us for a while.
I guess I'll just add for my part that what was really surprising to me was also one of our major findings that we saw, not just in the survey data, but also I think in the quantitative data, which is the extent to which the sort of declining admin numbers that we do observe in large Wikipedias are really more attributable to a recruitment problem rather than a retention problem.
Thank you all for this complete answer. I would like also to open the mic for folks in the room if there are questions here.
There is another question from the stream.
Go ahead.
That's okay.
Stacey. Yeah, please.
All right. The question is from Amina, and it is, are there also efforts that we know about to reform the RFA and other wikis?
I can take that one a bit because I dug into the RFA process. So one of the fun methodological challenges is that I believe most of us are not a primary speaker of the language of most of the languages we looked at for the survey. But with that caveat, I'm not aware personally of major RFA reforms to the degree of, say, the October 2024 RFA changes on English Wikipedia. I understand that there have been multiple, I would call them more like recruitment efforts, rather than full-on RFA reforms for Indonesian Wikipedia that leans very heavily on the Indonesian Wikipedia chapter to sort of find sort of up-and-coming editors and kind of at an early stage in their Wikipedia career, introduce them to admins and kind of get them used to the idea that, oh, I could run for admin. This is something I could do. I understand Catalan Wikipedia in the mid-2010s also went through a slight loosening of the formal requirements for admin candidacy. And quite a few of these wikis just have different RFA systems. So, for example, a few of them take a more formal vote rather than the consensus model as it's presented on English Wikipedia. And there have been sort of minor reforms associated with changing the specific vote thresholds that are required for eligibility. But I couldn't speak with any sort of definitive authority on the details of any of those, unfortunately.
Thanks, Claudia. I have a question for all of you, and this is also related with another research that you all participated, that is the one about moderators, and also related with some of the comments that we've seen in terms of which challenges or problems you found in measuring admin's work, in the sense that when you run the interviews, maybe you can get more insights on the work that they do, but when we want to measure actions, basically we measure logged actions, that is usually reactive things. So and we don't have a clear sense, or it's not easy to know exactly how much time something takes. So a lot of, for example, the social problems that might exist in larger communities, what we are able to see or to measure are the concrete action, but we don't know all the social process behind that, or all the time that some of this activity requires. So in general, how good you think are the signals that we have for measuring admin's activity, and how much work this really represents, like how much human time is invested? How good or how far you think we are from measuring this correctly?
Big question. I'll get us started again. So outside of the stuff that's explicitly logged, there are a lot of circumstances I could think of drawing from our interviews of admins telling us, or former admins saying, oh, I was expected to do things like settle disputes between people on Wiki, sometimes settling disputes between Wikipedians that were happening on a third-party platform, such as over email, Discord, IRC, or even in person, which is, let's face it, impossible for us to capture. Like, we're never going to be able to get metrics on the number of times you helped stop a fight at like a conference. I would love to, but we can't. So in terms of measuring what we chose and sort of what we can measure, I think this is it's sort of a I don't know how you would describe it. Maybe Caroline or Yu-Ming might be more suited to answer. We are looking at efforts right now at sort of expanding what we can measure and sort of thinking about more sophisticated ways that we can capture the degree of general moderation type work, not just admin work from admin users. We do have to specify.
Thank you very much, Claudia. I don't know if there are more comments on this from other folks. Nope. Okay.
Oh, sorry.
Daisy?
Yes, there is a question about whether the integration of tools and features like Mint or other GPT-generated contents have any additional impacts to the declining graph of admins, along the lines of maybe adding more workload or burnout.
I can address that a little bit, but I think largely the answer is no, we don't have a great way to to sort of confirm or deny what impacts that sort of thing may have. It's a good question, though. I think if I understand it correctly, the question is sort of like what additional impact like the contributions made through some of these other tools or methods may have on the administrator workload. Yeah, I don't know, Caroline, do you have any thoughts on how we might be thinking about that in the future? But I think largely the answer is like, no, we don't have a great sense at the moment.
Yeah, just to echo, I'll echo what Eli said and say that there are a lot of things that we can look at now that we've got these really sort of baseline metrics figured out. And I think long-term seeing the effects of things like RFA reform, for instance, and like the impact that AI-generated content is having on admins' workload will be very important to track. So thanks for asking that.
Thanks. There's one more question from YouTube, which is from Julian. I don't think this project has directly looked at this, but the question is, can very active admins doing most of the work offload some of their work to lower activity admins without those admins feeling peer pressure to do admin chores? Do we have data on some threshold about this?
I would say this is an activity I would love to study in more depth and would suggest to anyone watching this either now or in the recording that that would be a wonderful project for future research. We are looking a little bit at at sort of admin-esque or sort of moderator tasks that could be performed by a wider group of people that don't necessarily need extended rights. So things like checking the quality of an edit, checking the quality of sources being added, that kind of thing. You don't need admin rights to do it, but there's sort of an expectation echoed by our interview participants that if you are an admin, you're supposed to be doing that stuff more often. Whereas if you're not, you sort of have more freedom in a sense to say, I don't want to do that. I'm going to do my regular editing contributions. As for data on offloading the work, I think that's a great opportunity for a sort of partnership. I'm sure my colleagues would agree. If wikis, feel empowered to conduct experiments of the sort, if, following our own recommendations, we could offer better information, better metrics to let them assess the impact of these kinds of experiments, I think that would be a great way to do it.
Okay, thank you very much, Claudia, and all the presenters for answering all these questions, and thank you all the people that participated in YouTube. I think this is one of the showcases with more conversations, questions, and discussions in YouTube. So thank you very much, and it shows that there's interest in this topic. So that's all from my side. So now I'll pass the mic to Kinneret. Yeah, Kinneret, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Diego. And thank you everyone for joining the research showcase today. And as Diego said, this lively discussion. A special thanks to our speakers, Eli, Yu-Ming, Caroline, and Claudia for presenting their work and answering the many questions. The Wikimedia Research Showcase is always made possible thanks to a coordination team. So thank you, Eli, who did also presenting and coordinating today, and Diego, who hosted the showcase and also helped plan it. I also want to thank Daisy and Isaac for moderating the Q&A on YouTube today. Next month's showcase is on gender gaps in alignment with Women's History Month. So we look forward to seeing you there, and thank you all for joining.